Hey folks, and welcome back to BLBN. Before we get into today's topic, I'd like to thank everyone for the outpour of support after our last broadcast, but I assure you I'm not turning into a zombie. It was just a minor respiratory illness that passed shortly after we aired that episode. I appreciate all those who were legitimately concerned, but I've been having to dodge a few zombie hunters who seem a little too eager to add another notch onto their belt. Calm down, fellas. With that out of the way, let's get on to today's topic. Disposing of the dead. Inevitably, when you settle down, you're going to start having bodies stack up around your location. This might seem like common sense, but piles of rotting bodies aren't exactly great. Okay, that's enough of that. You know, a while back I made that video on story generators, and in the comments there was this game that kept coming up, which I want to talk about. That game was, Unhinged is probably one of the best examples of this too. It's probably one of the best sandboxes I've ever played. Unhinged fits right in there. You can just do whatever when you start and don't get any directions. One of my become a lone wandering swordsman, or build a drug empire, or decide to overthrow this from Berserk, or like Joel from The Last of Us type. Or like the time in Unhinged when I had to eat my own son to survive, and save the town from dust bandits. Except I didn't, I just ate my son and got decapitated. Stronger. Where Unhinged? Unhinged is one of these types of games that I love.
Kinshi, how the fuck is it not mentioned in your video?
No, not Unhinged. I'm sure it's a great game, but I've never played it, mostly because it wasn't on my radar until that video came out. No, I'm talking about Project Zomboid. Project Zomboid, for the uninitiated, is a zombie survival simulator created by British and Canadian developers, the Indie Stone. The game is set in a fictional Knox County, Kentucky, which contains a number of real-life towns such as Muldrow and West Point. I tried the game way back around the time when it first came out, and at the time it was neat, but there wasn't a ton to do. I had put it down and mostly forgot about it, with the exception of occasionally seeing a nurse clip from time to time in the past couple years. Then I got sick and did the Zombie Plague PSA, and I realized just how much it changed. For about 10 years now, the game has been under constant development by some passionate developers, and I have to say it stands out in multiple aspects I hadn't expected. It's not like any other zombie game I've played. It has deep gameplay mechanics, but not to the point of being overwhelming. The community is fantastic, and even if you get bored with the main game, you have your pick of challenge scenarios and a plethora of mods to spice things up. The game is over a decade old, but it wasn't until the end of 2021 when it blew up. So why was the game slept on for so long by so many people? And what really makes the game shine? As always, I'd like to start with learning a bit more about the developers. Project Zomboid is the first and only commercial game released by the Indie Stone thus far, but the group, consisting of Chris Simpson, Andy Hodgetts, and Will Porter, got their start developing mods. They each had professional experience working on games, but hadn't worked on many projects they were enthusiastic about, so they worked together to develop mods for games they found interesting. The most notable example of the group's work pre-Zomboid is the Sims 3 story progression mod, which they described as turning The Sims into a soap opera. Sometime afterwards, they met Marina Soichong via some game development forums, where she was developing her own projects. In 2009, she joined the team as an artist, the Indie Stone was officially incorporated into a company, and the four of them set about making their first game, Pause. As best I can find, Pause was set to be a 2D platform fighter with a number of game modes, including things like Tag and King of the Hill. This is also where Spiffo the Raccoon, Project Zomboid's mascot, first appeared. The game was put on hiatus so Chris and Andy could assist in helping build the game Privates, a health education game which was critically well received and even won a BAFTA award. However, it was ultimately rejected for release on the Xbox 360 due to it being about content one could describe as not safe for work, while simultaneously being targeted at a younger demographic. Again, it was a health education game. They'd hoped it'd bring in some revenue to help with Pause's development, but in fact, the failed release of Privates led to a certain amount of notoriety, which backfired and led to the project getting cancelled. A few months before Pause was cancelled, the group started development of secret Project Alpha Romero, and took lessons from how Minecraft was funded, copying the early access model as opposed to the more traditional funding strategies they used for Pause. Pause was officially cancelled in March 2011, and the first version of Project Zomboid was released as a tech demo 1 month later in April. They had anticipated relatively meager funding, not really expecting many people to donate. But then one of their early blog posts made its way to Reddit, and they started receiving more donations than they could handle. Early Zomboid had a number of setbacks. The team was overwhelmed trying to hand process all the donations they were receiving via PayPal, and PayPal was freezing their funds, which actually happened to many developers doing the same thing at the same time, which meant they still had financial woes until they could figure out a workaround. On top of all of that, in October 2011, they had moved to a new location, and directly after the move had got broken into, and had their laptops with the Project Zomboid source code on it stolen, which apparently hadn't been backed up for quite a while. To top it off, when they discovered their laptops had been stolen, they had just come home after a visit to the bar and notified the public via Twitter. To say the internet tore them a new one would have been putting it lightly. In July 2012 at EGX Res, they gave a talk titled How Not to Make a Game, and talk about many of the early ordeals they faced, both with Zomboid and their other early projects. This rocky start, combined with people having a similar bland experience as I did, led to many people leaving the game for a long while. 10 years of good faith effort in developing the game and supporting the community came to a head with the release of Build 41 in December of 2021. Build 41 was a top-to-bottom overhaul of just about every system in the game. Primarily animations, but also new player models, weapons, tools, skills, an updated combat system, a new foraging system, an in-game map, an overhauled sound system, an entire new section of the map to explore, and more. And even when it was still in beta, you can see the uptick in players. It's small, but it's there. Then Build 41 released officially with the most important feature of the bunch, multiplayer. And that's when people really started getting into the game because it's had a fairly healthy player population ever since. So what makes it special? How did it sink its claws in and start eating up people's time? Well, the devs have actually explained as much in an interview before. To quote an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun from June 2011, "Thing is, the game isn't so much an idea, but a vision of a zombie game we've discovered most big fans of zombie films have. Basically, films were our biggest inspiration rather than other zombie games. We can never claim it's an original idea for a game, but we think that's why it resonates with people. Because anyone who's a zombie fan, ourselves included, have talked about this game with their zombie fan friends. We have a joke that we bought the design document for this game from Max Brooks. We read World War Z ages ago and recently bought a copy of the Zombie Survival Guide, and it reads pretty much like a document of what should be in the game. The whole zombie apocalypse scenario is something we've all discussed at some point, though you really find a lot of people's suggestions we pretty much instantly agree with or have previously thought of. The idea comes fully formed in everyone's minds because of the more action-y focus of modern zombie games. We always wished you could board up windows and push furniture against the doors. So has everyone else. It's like little things, such as the pre-made character you start with in this tech demo being a slightly balding man. We wanted to make a proper zombie apocalypse where you're not immune, you're not some hero, you're just some guy or girl who wakes up to find the dead have come back to life and are eating the neighbors. Yeah, the everyman thing was important to us. We want people to play as the businessman or the milkman, not always the cop or the commando. I think this philosophy in building the game is what makes it so successful. Zombie games most often fall into one of two categories. You're either absolutely overpowered and are mowing down wave upon wave of the undead, or you're in a tragedy where zombies are more of an obstacle that need to be dealt with. But the true villain is in fact other people, or somewhere in between. There's only a few games which take the angle of zombie survival simulator, and many of those that do feel like a dry experience. There's DayZ, but I don't think anyone would want to play DayZ single player. It has always been more about player interactions in a survival sandbox rather than a truly compelling PvE experience. There's State of Decay, but I'd hesitate to call it a simulator, as it's much too gamey. It's more of a action RPG in my mind. There's Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead, which has more than just zombies, but has the deep level of gameplay to be called a proper simulator of sorts. However, it's not very user-friendly. If you don't spend time just learning how to play, you'll have a significant challenge getting into and properly enjoying it. Project Zomboid stands out among the pack. Through years of constant development, the sandbox has grown to encompass many different playstyles and mechanics. I think the only game I've played which rivals it in depth would be something like Cataclysm, but even then Zomboid beats it in my opinion, despite not being quite as deep, because it didn't have to give up user-friendliness to achieve that complexity. I also think Project Zomboid is the only game I'm aware of that does the Romero-esque Night of the Living Dead style of zombies correctly. There's no variants or mutations, they don't sprint to chase you down, nothing like that. They're all the slow, shambling, dumb sort of zombie. But there's a lot of them, and they're very persistent, and they can be surprisingly sneaky if you don't look out for them. And despite them being dumb and weak, you still need to care for your survivor. Attract too many at once, and death is all but assured unless you can shake them, because trying to fight all of them can result in you getting tired, hungry, thirsty, and overexerted, while also making sound that attracts more. Sprinting to run away also attracts zombies. In fact, zombies trying to get to you attracts other zombies as they pass each other, or make sounds banging on doors and windows to get to you. You can distract them with loud sounds such as car horns, gunshots, or noisemakers to draw the horde to an area away from where you actually want to operate, or you can simply sneak by, or you can take them down in smaller pockets rather than fighting the whole horde. This both makes the game challenging and simultaneously gives the player freedom to deal with those challenges as they see fit. This is great because it keeps the player's mind active. They can't allow themselves to get complacent, because they need to manage not just combat, but also the well-being of their survivor and all the gear they accumulate. You can be bitten by a zombie, you can get a cold from being out in bad weather, you can leave the stove on for too long, which burns down your base. There's so many ways you can meet your end, and that's great. It really leans into the fact that such a zombie apocalypse would be bleak. Even when you first start the game, the message, "This is how you died," appears as if it was the beginning of a movie, and you will die. But in the zombie apocalypse, death is not the end. Upon your untimely demise, a menu pops up for you to create a new character. You choose their former occupation and a number of traits you want them to take on, as well as their starting appearance. And just like before, "This is how you died" appears again, as if it was someone else's story picking up at this point. And as this new survivor, you can keep wandering the wastes where things are persistent. If you explore the same areas, you can come across a shambling husk of your former self and end up getting your gear back through some percussive negotiation. The same is true if you're in multiplayer. You'd be able to come across the remnants of other players each time they die. And with some thought, you can dissect exactly what went wrong and learn the story of what unfolded. This is on top of some already top-notch environmental storytelling, where you can learn how the zombie outbreak started through radio broadcasts and TV shows, as well as places which fell to ruin like boarded-up buildings, overran prisons, car crashes, and the like. It's immersive, it's engaging, and it's great to play with friends. Admittedly, I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but if you're like me and was unsure if the game would be good, I'd say it's a fantastic investment of $20, especially if you can get your friends to join in. You will get plenty of mileage out of it. My only complaints about the game come from the fact I'm a born and raised citizen of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I appreciate it anytime we're featured in media, because it's fairly rare you get stories based here. However, I do want to point out the fact that the real Knox County is on the other side of the state in southeast Kentucky. The most iconic thing I can mention to you about it is the fact that it's one of 3 counties which trisect the town of Corbin, whose claim to fame is being where Colonel Sanders opened the first KFC in 1930. I don't really blame the devs for that one though. We're in the top 4 for most counties out of every state, and having like 4 of them on the map would probably be pretty confusing. However, not having a fried chicken restaurant to compete with Spiffos is inexcusable. KFC is like one of 3 things we're known for internationally, next to the Kentucky Derby and the bourbon industry. But hey, the upcoming Build 42 is set to be a big revamp to farming and adds animals. So who knows, we might get horses and the ability to make a still sometime in the future. And if not, I bet somebody will mod them in. The Steam Workshop is really extensive. For now though, I think that's all I have for you, so I'd like to... Sorry, that sounds like I have some business to take care of. I'll be right back.
Oh God, there are more than I thought there'd be.
Thank you, Sharon, for that weather update. That's all for today's broadcast, folks, but before we go, I'd like to remind everyone that BLBN is part of the Knox Public Radio Network. We're largely funded and supported by listeners like you. If you'd like to support the production of our episodes, please go to our website at ko-fi.com/BuffaLou. That is ko-fi.com/BuffaLou. I'd also like to mention that donators will get early access to the community's Discord channel, which is still under construction, and exclusive access to the Moneybags Club therein. I hope you guys will join us for some community fun, and I will catch you in the next episode.